Most people completely misunderstand the foundation of success. They believe motivation is the starting point, that some magical feeling must arrive before action becomes possible. They wait for energy, they wait for inspiration, they wait for the perfect moment when everything feels right. But that moment never arrives for most people, and that is exactly why most people never change their lives. The truth is far more uncomfortable, and once you understand it deeply, you will never be the same again. Discipline is not emotional. It is mechanical. It does not care how you feel, what mood you are in, or how difficult your situation looks in the moment. Discipline is the ability to give yourself a command and obey it regardless of resistance. It is the internal authority that says, "We are doing this now," even when every part of your mind tries to negotiate, delay, or escape. And this is where the real separation between average people and exceptional people begins. Think about how most people live their lives. The alarm rings in the morning, and the first instinct is not action, it is negotiation. 5 more minutes. I'm tired, I'll start tomorrow. And in that moment, without realizing it, they have already lost the day. Because the first battle of the day is not physical, it is psychological. It is the battle between command and comfort. And every time you choose comfort, you weaken your identity. You teach your mind that resistance works, that excuses are acceptable, that delay is normal. Now contrast that with a disciplined individual. The alarm rings and there is no debate. There is no internal courtroom where excuses are presented and defended. There is only execution. Get up, move, act. Not because it feels good, but because it is required. This is where power is built, not in the moments of excitement, but in the moments of resistance. Motivation, by its nature, is unstable. It comes and goes like weather. One day you feel inspired, the next day you feel empty. If your entire life depends on emotional states, then your life is unstable by design. You become a slave to your environment, to your mood, to external triggers that you cannot control. And that is not freedom. That is dependence. Discipline, however, creates freedom. It sounds contradictory to weak minds because they think discipline is restriction. But in reality, discipline is liberation from chaos. When you are disciplined, you are no longer controlled by impulse. You are no longer dragged around by distraction. You are no longer reacting to every feeling that passes through your mind. Instead, you become the source of direction. You decide, you execute. You move forward regardless of emotional noise, and this is where the transformation begins. Because once you prove to yourself repeatedly that you can act without motivation, something shifts inside your identity. You stop identifying as someone who tries and start identifying as someone who does. That shift is everything. Because your identity determines your behavior, and your behavior determines your entire life trajectory. Every successful person you admire has built this exact mechanism internally. They do not wait for motivation to train, to work, to study, to build, to create. They understand something most people refuse to accept. Feelings are not instructions. Feelings are background noise. If you obey feelings, you become inconsistent. If you master feelings, you become unstoppable. And the uncomfortable truth is that discipline is built through repetition of discomfort. It is not discovered, it is forged. Every time you choose action over laziness, you strengthen that internal structure. Every time you override the urge to quit, you build psychological resilience. Every time you act when you don't want to act, you are literally rewiring your identity at a neurological level, creating a version of yourself that is harder, sharper, more focused, more controlled. But most people never reach that stage because they retreat at the first sign of discomfort. They interpret resistance as a signal to stop, when in reality resistance is the signal that they are finally doing something meaningful. The mind always resists growth. It prefers familiarity, even if familiarity is destroying it slowly. That is why discipline is not just a habit, it is a war against the primitive programming of the human mind itself. And in this war, motivation is useless. It is unreliable. It is temporary. Discipline is the only structure that holds when everything else collapses. It is the backbone of every achievement, every transformation, every breakthrough that looks impossible from the outside, but was simply repetition from the inside. Because when no one is watching, and no emotion is pushing you, and no reward is visible yet, discipline is what keeps you moving forward when comfort is the enemy of greatness. If you truly study the lives of people who achieve extraordinary results, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. They are not addicted to comfort. In fact, they actively escape it. While most people are building their entire existence around convenience, ease, and emotional safety, high performers are doing something completely opposite. They are deliberately walking into discomfort because they understand something that the majority of people refuse to accept. Comfort is not harmless, it is dangerous. Comfort does not kill you instantly, it kills your potential slowly, quietly, and permanently. The modern world is designed to make you comfortable. Everything is engineered for instant gratification. You do not need to wait for anything anymore. Food arrives at your door without movement. Entertainment is available without effort. Communication happens without real interaction. Work is increasingly avoided through shortcuts and automation. On the surface, this looks like progress, but psychologically it is a trap, because every layer of convenience removes friction, and friction is exactly what builds strength. Think about the human body. Muscle does not grow in comfort. If you sit still all day, your body does not become stronger, it becomes weaker. Strength is created through resistance. The same principle applies to the mind. Mental strength is not created in ease. It is created when you force yourself to do what is difficult. When you wake up early even though you are tired. When you work longer even though you want to stop. When you continue even when there is no immediate reward. But most people avoid this process completely. They structure their entire life around avoiding discomfort. They choose the easiest option in every situation. They sleep a little longer. They postpone difficult tasks. They choose entertainment over education. They choose relaxation over effort. And slowly, without realizing it, they begin to lose their edge. Not all at once, but gradually in a way that feels normal. And that is the most dangerous part. Comfort does not feel like failure. It feels like safety. It feels like I deserve a break. It feels like I'll do it later. It feels like I'm just tired today. But every time you give in to that voice, you are not just resting, you are reinforcing weakness. You are training your mind to avoid pressure. You are conditioning yourself to retreat instead of advance. Greatness, on the other hand, is built in the exact opposite direction. It is built when you repeatedly choose what is difficult over what is easy. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. Because identity is formed through repetition. If you repeatedly choose comfort, you become a comfortable person. If you repeatedly choose discipline, you become a disciplined person. There is no neutrality in this process. You are always becoming something. The uncomfortable truth is that most people already know what they should do. They know they should work harder. They know they should train. They know they should study. They know they should build something meaningful with their time. But knowing is not the problem. Execution is the problem. And execution fails because comfort always presents itself as a softer alternative. Comfort speaks in a very convincing voice. It tells you that you can start tomorrow. It tells you that one break will not matter. It tells you that you have already done enough for today. It tells you that you are still better than others, so you can relax. And if you listen to that voice repeatedly, your standards begin to drop without you noticing. What used to feel unacceptable slowly becomes normal. This is how potential is destroyed. Not through dramatic failure, but through daily compromise. One small delay, one skipped effort, one avoided challenge, repeated over months and years until the distance between your actual life and your potential life becomes massive. High performers eliminate that negotiation entirely. They do not allow comfort to make decisions for them. They understand that every moment of discomfort they avoid today becomes a limitation they must face tomorrow. So instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" they ask a completely different question. What happens to my future if I don't do this? That shift changes everything. Because once you stop worshiping comfort, you start building power. You start building resilience. You start building a version of yourself that is not dependent on ideal conditions. You become someone who can function under pressure, under fatigue, under resistance. And that is where real confidence is born, not from positive thinking, but from proof. Proof that you can act even when it is difficult. Proof that you can continue when others stop. Proof that you are not controlled by emotional softness. And as you continue down this path, something very important begins to happen internally. Comfort starts to lose its authority over you. The same things that used to stop you no longer have power. The same excuses that used to work no longer influence your behavior. The same distractions that used to pull you away begin to feel irrelevant, because your identity is shifting from someone who avoids difficulty to someone who seeks mastery through it. And in that shift, your entire perception of life begins to change. Challenges no longer feel like threats. They feel like opportunities to strengthen your character. Hard tasks no longer feel like punishment. They feel like training. Pressure no longer feels like stress. It feels like development. And slowly, the boundaries that once limited you begin to disappear. If you want to understand the real secret behind unstoppable self-discipline, you have to go deeper than habits, deeper than motivation, deeper than routines. Because all of those things eventually fail if the identity underneath them is weak. The most powerful transformation in any human being does not happen at the level of action first. It happens at the level of identity. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of who you believe you are. Most people try to change their lives by forcing behavior. They say things like, I will try to be disciplined, or I will try to stop being lazy, or I will try to be consistent. Because trying still allows quitting. Trying still allows negotiation. Trying still allows escape. And that is why most people never change permanently. They modify behavior temporarily, but the identity remains the same. And eventually the old identity pulls them back. Now think about the difference when someone shifts identity instead of behavior. A disciplined person does not say, I am trying to wake up early. A disciplined person says, I wake up early. There is no debate, no internal negotiation, no emotional courtroom where excuses are presented. It is simply who they are. And when behavior is tied to identity, consistency becomes automatic. Not easy, but automatic. This is the point most people miss. Discipline is not something you do occasionally. It is something you become. And once you become it, your actions stop feeling like decisions and start feeling like expressions of identity. You are no longer forcing yourself to act a certain way. You are acting in alignment with who you believe you are, but building this identity requires something uncomfortable. It requires breaking the emotional attachment to weakness, because every person, without exception, has patterns of avoidance, patterns of procrastination, patterns of distraction, patterns of emotional escape. And if you continue to protect those patterns, you continue to protect the identity that produces them. You cannot keep the identity of a distracted person and expect the results of a focused one. It is not possible. So the transformation begins with a confrontation. You have to look at the moments where you choose weakness and stop romanticizing them. The moment you say, I'm just tired, and allow yourself to quit early, that is not harmless. That is identity formation. The moment you say, I'll do it later, and believe it without challenge, that is identity reinforcement. Every small excuse is a vote for the type of person you are becoming, and this is where most people stay trapped. They think big change requires big action, but real change is built in small decisions repeated daily. The decision to get up when you do not want to. The decision to continue when you feel resistance. The decision to focus when distraction is easier. These are not dramatic moments, but they are defining moments. Because identity is not shaped in public victories, it is shaped in private choices. If you repeatedly choose laziness, even in small ways, you begin to identify as someone who is inconsistent. If you repeatedly choose discipline, even in small ways, you begin to identify as someone who follows through. And once that identity locks in, everything else becomes easier, not because life changes, but because you change. There is a powerful shift that happens when you stop asking, can I do this? And start asking, is this who I am? That question eliminates hesitation. Because if something does not match your identity, you reject it automatically. A disciplined identity does not argue with distractions. It does not negotiate with excuses. It does not debate with comfort. It simply does not participate, and over time, this creates a new internal standard. You begin to tolerate less weakness from yourself. You begin to respect your own word more seriously. You begin to feel discomfort when you act out of alignment with your identity. And that discomfort becomes a guide, not a punishment. It tells you when you are drifting. It signals when you are lowering your standards. It reminds you who you are becoming. This is why identity is more powerful than willpower. Willpower is limited. It drains. It fluctuates. It depends on emotional energy. But identity is stable. Identity is structural. Identity does not require motivation. It simply expresses itself, and when you build an identity that rejects weakness, something remarkable happens. You stop needing constant external pressure. You stop relying on motivation videos, productivity hacks, or temporary inspiration, because your internal identity becomes the driver. You move because that is what you do. You work because that is who you are. You persist because quitting is no longer compatible with your self-image. At that stage, discipline is no longer something you are trying to achieve. It is something you are protecting. You protect it from distraction. You protect it from excuses. You protect it from comfort. You protect it from old habits that no longer match your direction, and slowly, your life begins to reflect that identity in every area. Your actions become more intentional. Your standards become higher. Your tolerance for wasted time becomes lower. Your focus becomes sharper. Not because the world changed, but because the person operating within it changed. Everything you have heard comes down to one simple truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Your future is not being decided by talent, luck, or circumstances. It is being decided in the invisible moments when you choose what is easy over what is right. It is decided when you hit the alarm and decide whether you obey discipline or surrender to comfort. It is decided when no one is watching and you still choose to act, or you choose to delay. Self-discipline is not a personality trait that some people are born with and others are not. It is a trained identity. It is built through repetition, through resistance, through the daily decision to do what you said you would do, especially when you do not feel like doing it. And every time you break that promise to yourself, you weaken the structure of your own identity. But every time you honor it, even in the smallest way, you strengthen it beyond what you can immediately see. Laziness is not just the absence of effort. It is a habit of surrender. It is a slow agreement with weakness. And the longer you stay in that agreement, the more natural it feels, until comfort becomes your prison and excuses become your language. But the moment you start refusing that agreement, something powerful begins to shift. You stop reacting to life and start directing it. You stop drifting and start building. You stop existing in cycles and start breaking them. There will never be a perfect time. There will never be a moment when everything feels easy, clear, and comfortable at the same time. That moment does not exist. What exists instead is your ability to act regardless of conditions, regardless of mood, regardless of resistance. That is where power is created. Not in theory, but in execution. Not in planning, but in doing. And the truth that most people only realize too late is this: every day you delay discipline, you are still making a choice. You are choosing a version of yourself that is smaller than what you could have become. But the moment you take responsibility for your actions, even without motivation, even without energy, even without perfect circumstances, you begin to build a version of yourself that cannot be easily stopped. Because once discipline becomes your identity, life stops controlling you. You begin to control life. And from that point forward, nothing about your potential remains the same again.